Zaczynamy? Well then, Madam Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, my name is Jan Ciaptacz, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the conference, The Baltic Perspective on the Energy Transition, Opportunities and Challenges, held as part of the 16th edition of the Warsaw Pre-Mood, an event that has proudly secured its place on the global roadmap of the preparations for the Wismut finals in Vienna. Before we begin our interesting discussions today, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to the Warsaw Wismut Association, the organizer of today's event, and its main partners, the Finland Arbitration Institute and the Embassy of Finland in Warsaw, for bringing us together to explore such interesting, crucial and timely topics. Special thanks go also to our patrons, the Court of Arbitration at the Polish Chamber of Commerce and the Leviathan Court of Arbitration. Gratitude is also extended to our distinguished moderators and speakers, whose insights and expertise will guide today's discussions on key issues closely related to this year's Wismut problem. There is no doubt that your contributions will make those discussions very engaging and thought-provoking. Most importantly, a warm welcome to all the Mutis who traveled to Warsaw as part of their journey to the WIS finals in Vienna. Over the next 2 days, 18 teams from 10 countries will be competing in 54 hearing rounds. May this experience gained here in Warsaw not only refine your advocacy skills, but also give you a competitive edge in the upcoming rounds in Vienna. And now, without further ado, let us officially open this conference. I am honored to invite our distinguished speakers for the opening speeches. Please welcome Professor Anna Zbiegień-Turzańska, Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to our audience joining us online. My name is Anna Zbiegień-Turzańska, and I'm the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Law and Administration, responsible for engagement and enterprise. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the conference titled The Baltic Perspective on the Energy Transition, Opportunities and Challenges, organized by the University of Warsaw Wismut Association and the Finland Arbitration Institute. This conference is held under the patronage of numerous institutions, among others, the Embassy of Finland in Poland. Please allow me to welcome Ms. Ambassador Päivi-Laine, Ambassador of Finland in Poland. Ms. Ambassador, your presence here is a great privilege and honor for us. Thank you for your kind support and cooperation. Moreover, I would like to call other conference patrons, such as the Court of Arbitration at the Polish Chamber of Commerce, the Leviathan Court of Arbitration, and my dearest beloved faculty, the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Warsaw. Please allow me to welcome all the distinguished guests and representatives of the named institutions. A warm welcome to all speakers today. Finally, a special welcome to all students participating in the Wismut competition. There are 18 teams this year, and many of them come from abroad. I must say I truly admire your passion for arbitration, dispute resolution, and international cooperation. A warm welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, the agenda of the conference today includes important legal issues concerning the energy sector in the Baltics. That sector has major significance, not only for the economy. The energy sector must be perceived also in terms of sovereignty, a concept which unfortunately is often abused and challenged nowadays. The first panel, titled The Winds of Change, Recent Trends and Developments in Renewable Energy Sector, will be devoted to energy investments in the Baltic region, wind farms, nuclear potential in the Baltics, The panel will also address the important question on how to finance new energy investments. The second panel, titled Energizing Partnerships, Regulatory Framework of the Sustainable Transformation and Energy Disputes in the Baltic region, will discuss the specifics of dispute resolution in the energy sector, issues relating to climate litigation, green arbitration, and many, many more. So as you can see, the agenda of the conference today is highly interesting. I must say that I truly admire the double perspective proposed by the organizers. It is thus important to see not only the current trends and developments in the energy sector, but also to look ahead and to visualize potential disputes arising in the energy sector and to examine the methods how to resolve them. The agenda of the conference is also very up-to-date, given the current geopolitical situation, great uncertainty, and attempts to question the concept of sustainable development. In fact, it seems that due to the times we are living in, the topics placed on the agenda today deserve even more of our attention. What is also important, the conference is closely linked to the Warsaw Pre-Moot competition, its 16th edition, where students play the role of legal representatives and participate in simulated proceedings before the Court of Arbitration. Also, the conference theme refers to the case to be examined within this year's competition. So the aim of our meeting here in Warsaw is to prepare students for the Wismut finals. So in this group and within this audience, I do not have to convince anyone of the importance of arbitration, both in terms of efficiency and autonomy. It is also clear that alternative dispute resolution methods play an important role when it comes to the creation of an open civil society. Ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that the conference today and the conclusions elaborated within each panel will contribute to a better understanding of the current challenges and opportunities in the energy sector in the Baltic region. I also hope that the presentations and discussions of today will be instructive and helpful for the Wismut competition. Good luck to all the participants of that challenging program. I hope that the journey you have just started will be both exciting and inspiring for your future. I declare hereby the conference open. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. And now please join me in welcoming Madam Ambassador Päivi Laine, Ambassador of Finland in Warsaw.
Dzień dobry. Hello everybody. Ja hyvää päivää kaikille, jotka mahdollisesti puhuvat suomea. It's a great honor to be here today, and thank you very much for the University of Warsaw Wismut Association for inviting me here today. And it's truly inspiring to see you, the young generation of law professionals, so engaged on the topic of green transition. And just a note on the actual moment in the world, I have to say that we live in a truly different world than maybe a month or two ago. And it's also dangerous and very unpredictable. But let's not concentrate on this very topic, but keep our eyes on the practical issues and problems that we have to solve. Our Embassy of Finland is very happy that the Wismut and Warsaw Pre-Moot competitions are centered around the arbitration rules of the Finnish Arbitration Institute. And it's also a big pleasure to see Nordea, one of the big Nordic banks and the leading law firms, to join today's discussion and supporting your endeavors. Events like this can be seen a great way to strengthen the international cooperation and also the Polish-Finnish relationship. The topic of today's conference is the Baltic perspective on energy transition, and I would like to share with you a few words about Finland's position. First, I would like to remind you or mention the Finnish commitment to decarbonization. We have set a very ambitious goal, achieving carbon neutrality by 2035. And that is one of the most ambitious targets in the world. We understand that this kind of successful energy transition cannot be achieved alone, but it requires cooperation, and especially with the neighboring countries. The backbone of Finnish energy transition is the shift towards renewable energy sources. And I think we have made quite significant strides of increasing our share of renewable energy mix. And it's around 40% that Finland's energy today comes from green sources. And it's including wind, solar, and bioenergy, and also, which is disputable whether it's green or not, but nuclear energy plays a huge role in today's world and in the transition of the energy markets. Wind energy, in particular, has seen a rapid growth in Finland. And our position, our location at the edge of the Baltic Sea makes it ideal for this kind of energy. And our government is supporting the development both onshore and offshore wind farms. Solar is also growing, even in Finland, despite of our Arctic weather, but we have long summers. And it has been especially popular among people putting solar panels on the roofs, and also the companies do the same. And we also have almost finished our renovation of the embassy, and we have solar panels there. And at home back in Helsinki, my husband just told the other day the sun is shining, but unfortunately panels are still so frosty that they don't produce too much, but waiting for warmer weather. Biomass energy, that has been a traditional source for Finland because of our extensive forest resources. And it still continues to be a key component of our energy mix. Finnish companies and the government, we are also investing a lot on energy storage technologies and making the energy system more resilient and able to accommodate with the intermittent nature of the renewables. And as I mentioned, of course, the nuclear plays a big role in Finnish energy mix. When we look at the Baltic region, the development of electricity grids, cross-border power lines and offshore wind energy are the key to diversify energy sources and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. EU has launched this very important Baltic energy market interconnection to integrate the energy markets of our region. Cross-border electricity connections such as EstLink interconnections with Estonia helps us to ensure that renewable energy which is produced in one country can also be used in another country. And it's facilitating to more stable and secure regional energy supplies. Baltic Connector pipeline strengthens the region's natural gas infrastructure and reduces dependence on external suppliers, especially on Russia. I'm not a legal expert, but I have a few words about the legislation. I'm a humanist, so forgive me if there is not too much on this perspective. But from the legal perspective, Finland's energy transition is supported by a combination of national laws and EU regulation. In Finland, we have a Finnish Climate Act and the Energy Efficiency Agreement, which play a crucial role in shaping our country's energy policies. And at the international level, Finland adheres, of course, to the EU's climate goals, including the Green Deal. And we also participate in the EU emission trading systems, this so-called ETS, which create financial incentives for companies to reduce their carbon emissions. We have closed very closely with Baltic states to align energy policies and ensure that each country's transition to cleaner energy is both sustainable and fair. This involves working on shared legal frameworks and policy incentives that support the growth of renewable energy markets. And to sum up, through continued collaboration, Finland and its Baltic neighbours are aiming to pave the way for cleaner, greener, and more interconnected energy future. The legal frameworks, including national policies and EU regulations, serve as a strong foundation for this transition. And in conclusion, I would really like to extend my warmest congratulations to all teams participating in today's conference and the pre-moot competition. This is a fantastic opportunity to you to showcase your skills, exchange ideas, and learn more from one another in an international setting. And that is more important today than it's maybe ever been. And I truly hope that the competition will not only be challenging, but also enjoyable. So take everything out of it, what you can, to grow intellectually and personally. And I wish you all the best of luck in the competition. Keep your passion for law and for world events alive, and let this experience be both inspiring and rewarding. Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. Using this opportunity, I would like to welcome today Ms. Agnieszka Dzięgielewska-Jończyk, Director General at Nordea Poland. And now we have the pleasure of welcoming our keynote speaker, who will set the stage for today's discussions. Please join me in welcoming Daria Kozłowska-Rautiainen from the Finland Arbitration Institute.
Let me see. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, arbitrators, counsel, industry specialists, and dear Mutis. My name is Daria Kozłowska-Rautiainen. I'm a senior lecturer at the Stockholm University, director of the ICAL LLM program, and a member of the Finland Arbitration Institute board. And considering the upcoming pre-moot, I am also a former Vismut coach. It is a privilege to address you today at a conference of such crucial importance. It is on energy transition and resolution of energy-related disputes. In a world increasingly shaped by security, energy concerns, sustainability goals, and geopolitical shifts, the Baltic region faces pressing challenges. The transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources is not just a necessity. It is also an opportunity. Yet, with opportunity comes legal and commercial complexity. Disputes, whether relating to infrastructure, investments, or supply, are inevitable. Robust and reliable dispute resolution mechanisms are crucial in maintaining stability and economic resilience in the region. Arbitration, as you know, offers neutrality, expertise, confidentiality, time efficiency, and enforceability. Critical factors in resolution of energy-related disputes. Energy companies and state-owned entities often rely on institutional arbitration. The Finland Arbitration Institute has been recognized as a reliable choice for resolving energy-related disputes by parties in the region and internationally. The Finland Arbitration Institute is known as being highly modern, but few know that the Finnish Institute is in fact one of the world's oldest institutions. It started operations in 1911 and has offered over a century of expertise in arbitration. The Institute was originally established to resolve disputes related to product quality issues in foreign trade, but currently disputes resolved under the FAI rules encompass a broad range of commercial relationships. The first rules were drafted in 1910 and have since then undergone, of course, continuous amendments to respond to the needs of both business and legal developments. The Mutis will be very well aware that the current version of the rules was introduced in 2024. As to the organizational structure, although the FAI is a part of the Finland Chamber of Commerce, it is completely autonomous in its decision-making. The Institute is comprised of the FIA board, where I am very privileged to be one of the 9 Finnish members. There are also 7 international members of the board. They all have a very distinguished and diverse background. The Secretariat is led by the Secretary General with 4 legal counsels, a legal assistant, and a marketing manager. Finally, and especially important this year, when the Institute has such a prominent role in the Vismut, we have also help in arranging events and in marketing. So what do? We focus predominantly on arbitration. The FAI administers both domestic and international cases, both under the standard arbitration rules and expedited arbitration rules. The board takes decisions according to the rules, and these include determination of the seat of arbitration or deciding on the number of arbitrators where the parties fail to agree on this. The board also appoints arbitrators, decides on challenges to arbitrators, takes prima facie decisions on jurisdictions, and decides on consolidation of cases. The Secretariat performs then the daily administrative functions, is in contact with the parties and the arbitrators, and also prepares decisions for the board to take. The Institute also provides practical resources like the arbitrators' guidelines, the award checklist, tax guidelines, and a note on the use of a secretary. Apart from administering arbitrations, the Institute also offers mediation rules, acts as appointing authority in ad hoc arbitrations, organizes training programs like the Finnish Arbitration Academy, which I can really warmly recommend, hosts events like the Helsinki International Arbitration Day conference. And in fact, the next one is upcoming on the 16th of May, so save the date. Mid-May is already a very nice time to come to Helsinki and explore Finland as well. We have support of Ambassador Laine in that. An important question for users, not only in the context of energy-related disputes, but generally for parties in arbitration, is that of confidentiality. And according to the FAI rules, unless otherwise agreed by the parties, the Institute itself and the tribunal shall maintain the confidentiality of the arbitration and award. And the parties are also under a confidentiality obligation unless otherwise agreed by them. The parties undertake to keep confidential all awards, orders, and other decisions, correspondence from the tribunal to the parties, as well as materials submitted by the other party in the proceeding. Limited exceptions apply, like, for instance, if disclosure were to be required by a legal duty. It's important to say that tribunals' deliberations are confidential and the parties can never opt out of that. Now, as regards to publication of awards, orders, and other decisions by the Institute, unless otherwise agreed by the parties, the Institute may publish these materials as long as any kind of identifying details are removed, but that is actually done very rarely, and in fact, now we do not have any such material on our webpage. I think it's always interesting to look into new statistics, and I'm happy to be able to present to you some fresh statistics for 2024. They have not been yet published on our webpage. So in 2024, we've had 75 new requests for arbitration. Those are both in national and international cases, with the majority of cases being domestic. Here you can see the top nationalities of the parties. Of course, Finland, not surprisingly, is top. But then from the Baltic region, we had also Estonia, Germany, Lithuania, Sweden, Denmark, and Russia. Other countries in Europe, Italy, Austria, France, the Netherlands, Slovakia, and UK. And then from other continents, we've had parties from Uruguay, Canada, US, and China. As regards arbitrator nationalities, which I guess is interesting for those here, number one is Finnish, then we had Norwegian, Swiss, Austrian, Estonian, Swedish, Chinese, German, UK, and Russian. And talking about the arbitrators, in the vast majority of cases, the arbitrations involved a 3-member panel, and we can say that it's a choice based in parties' agreement, because the FI rules actually provide for a fallback rule of a sole arbitrator if the parties have not decided how many arbitrators there should be. So that speaks to parties' needs and also partly to the complexity and size of the disputes. But despite there being a 3-member tribunal in over 3/4 of the cases, sometimes can mean that those are heavier cases, the time efficiency is quite remarkable. We can see that the average duration under the standards rules has been 9 months, and in expedited arbitration, 3.4 months. So very, very, very time efficient proceedings. As I have already mentioned, the disputes submitted to the FAI cover a broad range of legal relationships. We can say that the top 3 disputed agreements last year were service agreements, construction agreements, and SPAs. Other subject matters related to shareholder agreements, delivery agreements, lease agreements, JV, consultancy, and insurance. And one could continue with the list. And as regards energy-related disputes, they are regularly submitted to the Finland Arbitration Institute. We see around 3 to 6 energy-related disputes every year, and this has been a constant for at least the past 5 years. Now I would like to take the lead of Ambassador Laine and highlight why Finland is so exceptional in the context of energy transition. Finland is a country large in area. It has roughly 340,000 square kilometers, so it is actually bigger than Poland. But it is sparsely populated with only 5.6 million people. But it is one of the world leaders in utilization of renewable energy. Based on the newest report for time period January to September 2024, published recently by the Finland's National Statistical Institute, 43% of energy consumption in Finland was represented by renewable energy. Finland's national energy and climate strategy to 2030 aims to increase the share to more than 50%. For comparison, based on the revised Renewable Energy Directive adopted in 2023, the EU target for 2030 is for the share of renewable energy to reach 42.5% of energy consumption. So you can see that Finland is already further than EU wants to be as a whole in 2030. The forms of renewable energy used in Finland, the most important ones are bioenergy. Then we have fuels from forest industry side streams and wood-based fuels. Not surprising considering how much forest there is in Finland. Then there's hydropower, wind power, the capacity of which just last year has grown 20%. Then there's ground heat. And as Ambassador Laine said, solar electricity is really growing. Based on the newest reports, in last year, the production has grown 62%, so quite considerably. Now, behind me, you can see the Finland's carbon neutrality plan presented by Ministry of Environment. Based on the new Climate Change Act, which entered into force in 2022, Finland aims to reach carbon neutrality by 2035. This puts Finland at the top of European countries and in the 4th place in the world after Bhutan, Suriname, and Uruguay. Ladies and gentlemen, the Baltic region is not just transitioning its energy systems. It is redefining its geopolitical and economic future. The transformation requires robust framework and neutral place for resolving inevitable disputes. Finland is uniquely positioned to be region's premier dispute resolution hub for energy-related conflicts. I invite you all to take full advantage of what Finland and the Finland Arbitration Institute have to offer. Let us work together to strengthen trust and build a resilient energy future for the entire Baltic region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this insightful introduction to further discussions. And now let us dive into the first topic, into the first discussion round, the winds of change, recent trends and developments in the renewable energy sector. We are joined today by a panel of distinguished experts who will share their insights on key developments in this very interesting industry. Leading this discussion as a moderator is Piotr Olkowski from the Leviathan Court of Arbitration. Please welcome our moderator and the speakers to the stage. Thank you.
No need to resolve the dispute. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Piotr Olkowski. I represent the Leviathan Court of Arbitration. I'm a member of arbitration committee in this court, and I'm also a lawyer in the dispute resolution team in the LA Piper in Warsaw. And we've decided that each of the panelists will introduce themselves
personally. So, Katarzyna.
Good afternoon. I'm Katarzyna Gronwald-Gil, representing Nordea Bank. I'm dealing with all ESG-related issues. I'm focused on the processes and reporting. In total, I have experience of more than 20 years in banking. Before joining Nordea, I was dealing with the credit processes of all type of clients, from the retails, SMEs, corporate and large corporate, recently on large corporates. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Patrick Figel. I am a partner at Linklaters, so I'm a lawyer. The reason I think I'm here is because when it comes to Baltic or Baltics, I've been involved in a number of projects, both in Poland and in the Baltic states, as well in Germany. So yes, I think I have the experience covering this part of the sea. So Paweł, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Paweł Pułacz. I'm the legal advisor. Graduated actually different university than this one. I'm really privileged to actually visit this building today. Studied in Poznań. I've been working in Warsaw law firm in Clifford Chance and overseeing energy practice. I'm a partner at the Clifford Chance with 18 years of experience advising clients in the energy sector, which explains why I joined this firm today and had the privilege working with clients on different sides of the table, both in energy disputes, but mostly in transactions and regulation matters. Thank you.
Remek Waszwoda. I am a director in the International Cooperation Department in PSE. PSE is a Polskie Sieci Elektroenergetyczne. This is the TSO for Poland. Also, I am a member of the board of ENSO-E. ENSO-E is the association of the TSOs from Europe. And I'm here, I was invited because I was directly involved in the process of preparation and the synchronization of the Baltics power system with continental Europe system that has been finalized during the weekend in between 8th and 9th of February. That's it.
We also would like to suggest that please feel free to jump in and interact, ask questions, because we really would like this conference to be very valuable and really interesting. And if someone would like to ask questions, we are here also to, or my colleagues are here to just try to answer. And we will discuss a number of topics because the area is so broad, so complex, and at the same time so interesting. I know a little bit what my colleagues were involved in the energy sector in terms of advisory and in terms of just their professional experience. So I will try to also lead the questions into that direction, but please help me also. If you're interested in some topics, please try to just to ask questions, to jump in. First question is for to everyone. The question is, what do you see as the biggest opportunity, challenge for the energy sector in the Baltic states? And if I may start from you, Patrick.
Thank you for this question, Piotr. I think this is a good starting point to say, making sure people understand what they do and how they do and do it together. That's key. Doing things together around the Baltic and Baltic states, to me, is the most important challenge and also the opportunity. Why? Because we'll hear from Remek, super exciting intro into into the electricity system change in the Baltic states from let's say the Soviet one into the modern one. This is super exciting. So Baltic states will finally be on this side of a planet when it comes to the electricity system. Not many people are aware of that. And then this gives a lot of opportunities to making sure that a generation is connected, because soon most of the Baltic states, meaning Estonia, and especially Estonia and Lithuania, will be able to produce most of their electricity from the renewables. And the question is, what's next? So next is exporting, and exporting means interconnector, and interconnector means working together. So from my perspective, the biggest challenge is make sure that all these countries and governments can work together and see and have a clear agenda. And this is, as we know, quite challenging.
Yes, fully agree with you as far as opportunities. Yes, I see the integration as the key role here. And also gaining the energy independency. So this is something that well, all these plans aim at. As a big challenge, I see it from the financial institution perspective. It's the financing of such projects. They are always very costly. They are long-term, so for the banks are more risky than others. But from the other side, they are, well, they are supporting transition to the sustainable environment. So yeah, also perceived as a, having other advantages. So yeah, but the main challenge I see in the financing of such projects.
Thank you. I'll maybe start with answering whether there are opportunities in the transition. I think, obviously, yes. There are definitely opportunities for us, advisors. Wouldn't be here if there was no transition. Transition means change, means movement, means actors changing, going somewhere or coming from somewhere. These guys, these people, they need counsel. They need someone to take them through what they know to something what's coming. When I started 18 years ago, I had no idea that energy law exists as a matter of separate regulations. And over the last 18 years, I've been doing nothing else but advising clients on energy because there was so many changes. And probably energy law is what changes most often, fortunately or unfortunately, depending where you sit. There are opportunities for all of you who want to jump into that train. That means, industry players, advisors, also consumers that simply want to change the way they function using electricity. That's also a challenge at the same time because it changes very quickly, very dynamically. There are people who believe that if there is no smoke, there is no electricity. And that, of course, entirely different reality than the ones we know today. Electricity is being generated differently than it used to be, and it changes super dramatically. You saw the numbers about Finland, that it's 40% plus coming already from renewables. I'm sure Remek will correct me, but Poland already reaches these targets. So we are no longer coal-based as such. We have almost 40% of generation of electricity coming from renewables, so we are quite advanced. I mean, and although less ambitious in targets, we are pretty fast in overdoing what the regulators set for us. So opportunities, yes. Challenges, pretty much the same. So the speed of changes, the amount of changes, this is super challenging and requires adjustment. And I think we're not fond of systems which are meant to last. I think changes is something which is a part of our nature. And the one thing I would add, I think it was also clear from your statements before, well, we always use plural when we talk about Baltics because there is one pond, but there are many players and stakeholders. I mean, essentially Baltic states, Poland, the Nordic countries, there's a number of countries involved. We are small, we are medium or big. but we are different, and that's also a challenge because essentially we have a similar environment and similar legacy sometimes, but different mindsets, different way of doing things, and different legal systems, and that's a challenge to integrate it and to choose the same direction of travel.
So on my side, maybe I will stick mainly to the challenges, I would say. From the technical perspective, as a representative of the TSO, I would rather say that there are numerous challenges in front of us, and mainly related to this transition from the generation based on the fossil fuels to the generation that is based on the renewables. And then I will maybe firstly link to the Baltic synchronization. Baltics understood as Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia synchronization. From their perspective, the biggest challenge right now will be to somehow align with the situation in which they are for almost 2 weeks right now. We are synchronized through one link. So for them, biggest technical challenge would be to be prepared, and this was the, I think, key element of the project for the Baltics, in a sense of these 3 countries, to be ready and to maintain secure system operation when being on an island. We are connected with one link. This link may trip, be disconnected, then automatically the Baltics will be on the island. With this, also taking into account the geopolitical situation, this question or item of resilience of the transmission network is one of the challenge that we are somehow, as a part of the connection is on our side. We need to also take part of it on our shoulders, but to big extent it is on the Baltics. We also, I believe that the trip of the S-Link 2, which this is yet additional thing that only proves that there needs to be somehow protection or monitoring of the network that was, we thought, secure on the seabed, and it seems that this is no longer the case. And then there is a big question: in what way, to what extent, how, with what means the TSOs are able to secure their assets. Here we have some lessons learned from the Ukrainians. They are doing great job with maintaining their system under the constant attacks. But I will say just to short that, so the thing is the securing the critical infrastructure, maintaining in operation. This is for the 3 Baltic states one challenging element. And the last one, I think, for all of us, this is the operation with the big amount of the renewables. So yes, it is true. Currently, the capacities in Poland of the renewables are a bit more than our peak demand. So we are 28 gigawatt system. Right now, if you add the wind generation and the PVs, we are, I think, above 30 gigawatts. So we might think that we could cover everything from the renewables. This is not the case. The renewables, as we see, this is the capacity. And what the TSO needs is the energy. Capacity is not equal to the energy. And this is as simple as that the PV is only operating during the sunshine. And when there is no sunshine, there is no energy. And then the challenge is, I think that this is the case for the PSC, for a number of the TSOs in Europe. And also, I think this is linked somehow to our presidency to build awareness and the need for yet additional tool on the energy market, which would be the power market. So in a sense, the market that would allow the TSO to somehow contract the power when there is no power in the renewables. And maybe I'll stop here. So.
Thank you very much for that. I will stop by a little bit on the renewables. I would like to briefly discuss with two panelists their involvement in the offshore wind, the so-called Polish offshore wind. Because currently in the Baltic Sea, there are two huge projects. One is 1.2 gigawatts, second is 1.5 gigawatts. The projects are Baltic Power. It's a joint venture of Canadian Northland Power and Orlen. And second is a joint venture of PGE and Ørsted, energy company from Denmark. And these projects really fascinate. They both fascinate me. And we have today the opportunity to ask questions to two leaders of teams of advisors from two law firms, from Linklaters and from Clifford Chance, who were both involved in each of those projects, advising to some of the financial institutions. Having this opportunity, I would like to ask maybe first Patrick and then Paweł about what challenges there were, how they see these projects, why it was so challenging, and why for Baltic Power we had 25 financial institutions who were financing the project, and why there are 20 who are involved in financing of Baltica 2 projects. If I may.
Sure. Thanks. That's a very good question. Challenges. Everything was challenging. I would put it that way, but it's not the right answer. I would say one of the challenges was we were doing this for the first time, so no one else has done it. Such project in, as you rightly say, it's so-called Polish part of the Baltic, because it's not really Polish, because it's not really Poland, but it's like we oversee this because we are doing this in the Polish exclusive economical zone. So this is already first challenge. What that really means that we're doing this in economical zone. We know what it means in terms of fishery, in terms of shipping, in terms of oil exploration. But in terms of doing this in offshore, we didn't know that. So that was a kind of the first challenge, to understand from the legal perspective, to understand what are we standing on. And we knew we're standing kind of somewhere deep down, which is not really Poland. So first question was when to do the pledging of the turbines for the financing. So that was one of the kind of the theoretical questions we dealt with. I mean, we didn't need to open the doors, because the doors were kind of opened by Germans before, because they have a similar situation, similar civil law system. So we kind of knew it that there is a cheat sheet from Germany in this respect. But that was purely legal and very, very theoretical. Then came the question of the support system. Because in Poland we have so-called contract for difference, which supports the generation of the electricity from both onshore and offshore wind, but there's no contract. So that was also challenging, because many of the lenders who formed the club were asking, where is this contract? Can we see the contract? There's no contract. It's only written in law. And it's just a so-called I would say, the shortcut that we take in saying that there's a contract, there's a CFD. There is a CFD, but without the contract. So it's a CFD based on statutory regulations, based on law. And typically, the regulations that are key in the contracts will take us, say, 25, 30 pages. In Polish law, it's about 5 pages only. A4 format. So it's a different level. So getting people to understand, and by saying people, I mean the lenders, to rely on law instead of a contract that you can see and review and amend easily was also a challenge. And then the third one, I would say, the structure, the contractual structure, because in most of the times when someone builds something large on the ground, there is one general contractor and a number of subcontractors, which makes the management of the contract much easier. It was not the case in offshore. Offshore is kind of offshore wind, takes a lot from the offshore oil and gas business, and there is no such thing as a general contractor. There is no EPC ROP. There's no one single point of a main contractor that you can go and say, you liable, you're on the hook for everyone who is below you as your subcontractor. To the contrary, in offshore, there are a number of contractors that the sponsors, so those who basically developed the project, need to manage and control. So that is also something which was not very familiar to then some of the Polish participants in this project. So that was another challenge. And there were other legal challenges, like, for instance, how to understand the situation that the vessels, so the ships that are involved, need to follow the knock-for-knock principle, which basically takes away the liability for the damages they create to each other, even intentionally. So yes, these were I would say, legal challenges. There were many others, but I'm very curious to hear from Paweł how these things, whether you have these things in your project when you were doing this work, and or was this anything else?
Thanks, thanks, Patrick, for that. Indeed, super interesting sector. Maybe just to start with, you mentioned two, and yes, the one that Patrick worked on and the one I've recently worked on, the PGE Ørsted project, are the two most advanced in terms of financing and starting the construction process. But it's actually 6 projects overall in the Baltic, in the Polish Baltic waters. Offshore projects that will develop, I guess, by now very quickly, and by 2027, 2028, you will see a lot of red lights when you travel the Polish seaside, and this time the lights will be in the water, not like now around Ustka. So these are the most advanced projects. There'll be more. You mentioned a lot of challenges. I'd like to then focus on the opportunities. I think offshore wind in Poland means we are in the Premier League of renewables, because in terms of technology and the sophistication, this is a totally different league. You've heard before that PV is something that essentially, you can install on every roof, every embassy. You can install it. There are tutorials on YouTube how to install PV panels. I'm not sure PSC will recommend to do it yourself, but I'm sure you will be able to, at least. And PV is something that my watch can charge from the solar system itself, and it's not a very sophisticated watch. Offshore wind is a different league in terms of the technology, but also the partners. Everything that's connected to offshore is I think a different league in terms of legal sophistication of the contracts, the partners. When you negotiate the grid connection agreement of offshore turbines with PSC, because you can only negotiate with PSC, and I wouldn't even call it negotiations, because you come and ask, and you will usually hear why things cannot change. It's a different level of sophistication, and this sophistication comes to Poland. And I think this is amazing, because the financing structure, the fact that you have 24 or 25 institutions being managed within one contract setup, it's also pretty unique, and that elevates our legal systems and our capabilities into a new level. And essentially every angle, wherever you touch it, it's a different level. So the service providers that have to do it, they have to be in a different league. The financial institutions, the amount of money being put into one pot. So you have to only imagine that it costs billions, and it all depends on one cable coming out from the sea. So the protection securities around it, including the sophistication of defense system, that's all around one particular system and one particular technology. I think that's amazing, because once it's here, we are indeed in a different league. It's going to take a couple of years before it really happens, in terms, before the electrons will come out of the turbines. But if I compare my work before offshore and after offshore, it really forced us to go to the next level. The good thing is that we were not creating it. We are actually learning from very well-established standards developed elsewhere. And I believe that's actually good, that we can learn on mistakes other people made when going through the system and just adjusting them to our market, which challenging. It's a challenge of its own. But from that perspective, well, just one word about the financing we've done, and I'm saying we, but I'm not a finance lawyer, I'm the energy guy. The difference between the financing that Orlen did is that they did it on the project financing, meaning that the company that is about to build and operate took the money, borrowed the money from lenders. And the PG Ørsted setup, you have two partners, 50-50 joint venture partners into the project. Ørsted is financing their share of the project out of their pocket, while PGE is contributing some of their equity, but taking loan from lenders at the holdco level, so at the company which is co-owner of a project. So you have two projects and two already quite different setups, and quite demanding. So essentially not easy to even rely on the expertise that Patrick and your team developed. We were forced to develop something new. That was already an amazing challenge. And you have two financings of essentially similar assets, already creating two new setups. Looking forward to hear about the new ones. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I totally agree. Oh, there's a question.
So, Patrick, for you, thanks. Thank you. So the 25 lenders had syndicated loan agreement for 4.4 billion fund the Baltic project. Do you see that as sort of the way forward for how these projects finance in the future? It's like to kind of de-risk them amongst this many institutions. And for Pavel, the 50-50 joint venture you described, for us in Canada, we do a lot of joint ventures, quite common in the energy industry. Is that, again, another sort of legal vehicle by which you guys see these types of projects gaining more traction in Poland, being like multiple joint venture partners? Or do you see that, leaders like Orlen and PG are going to have to take on this risk themselves? Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I would put it that way. 25, or also around the 25, is not only financial institutions, so commercial banks and financial institutions, including those from Canada. I think, yes, that was the must for the first project like this. I wouldn't, well, and probably there wouldn't be a difference in whether 22 or 27 at the end of the day. Whenever you have a bath, say 10, 15, is already challenging. But it was the way to do it, I guess, to de-risk, given all the challenges which I've mentioned and others which I did not mention, but maybe some of them are too technical, like, how do you finance the offshore cable line? That was another huge bit. And in Poland, it's different than in other countries. For instance, in Germany, the TSO is financing that or is in charge for this. In Poland, to the contrary, sponsors, a developer needs to pay for that, which is, it costs a lot. It really costs a lot. So I would put it that way. Yes, 25 as a starting point. I believe that the next projects will require a different amount of sponsors. But it's this at the end of the day, it's commercial. They can do whatever later on. They can be 25. They can syndicate some of the banks. I don't know if that's the case. So please don't quote me. But that's typically how it works. And my assumption would be that within the next project, which Pavel mentioned, which are up and coming, I wouldn't be surprised to see a bit less, but not significantly. I don't think there will be 8 sponsors for these projects, which are in the so-called phase 1 in Poland right now.
And before I answer my question, I'll just chip into what Patrick said. I would say, I think the way to look at these projects is like a train. There's a sponsor who leads the train, and there are lenders who are invited to jump in. Most of them want to jump in because they want to be green, they want to finance renewables, they want to finance the mega projects and the first projects, which will probably offer a bit more than the projects to come. And they want to be part of that. Also, the sponsors don't want to rely on just 1 or 2 or 3 institutions. They want to dictate the tempo and they dictate the terms. And that's the difference between this financing and others, where a sponsor is really in the driving seat. So I think they take benefit of having a big number of smaller lenders that jump in on the train or can be requested to leave the train on the first stop if the sponsor doesn't like them. So I would say, yes, this will continue, especially for these big projects. No one wants to take a risk of a small pool of lenders. And in terms of JVs, whether this is the right vehicle, I would say definitely. And you can see it not just in Poland, but elsewhere. But the thing about this JV is that it's a JV, but for a selected number of partners. Not everyone can be a JV partner of offshore partner. If you look globally, most of the offshore projects are sooner or later farmed down. And farmed down meaning you not necessarily stay as 100% owner of a project. You invite partners to join you. You are selective when it comes to who you invite to the table. And it's a question of whether you do it at the beginning or you do it at a later stage of the process. Now, usually there is a pool of partners who start the project, and these are either the usual suspects, the Ørsted, Equinor, Total, so the 2 handfuls of global offshore wind players, or the local guys who secure the project sites. In Poland, we had a mixture of both. We have the local players, utilities or state-controlled companies, they managed to secure the sites, and this is key. And then they invited the partners with experience because it doesn't make sense to reinvent the wheel. So they invited the partners. PG invited Ørsted to partner up. Orlen invited Northern Power. Polenergia, who was actually the first one, invited Equinor. Others do it that way, that they first construct it and they want to do it themselves because they know better. Once the project is de-risked or operational, at least financed, that they will they farm down and they invite the partners to do it. I'm pretty convinced it will continue that way. The thing is that the projects we mentioned are so-called wave 1 projects in Poland. There is a second wave coming very soon, hopefully. And the fun fact about these projects is that there is 10 of them, but they're all shared between PG and Orlen only. And the so-called competitive process to award these projects was not that competitive after all. And only 2 Polish companies secured these 10 sites. And the big question is whether they will share and they will invite the partners, and if so, who, to do these projects together. And I think that's the question, but I'm pretty sure if you ask me, I would say yes, I would say soon. And I would say number of partners. So they also don't want to take a bet on just 1 or 2. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I know Remek wanted to contribute.
Yeah, I wanted to contribute to before statements from the perspective of the Polish TSO, because these projects also are changing the perspective of our operation. One, in terms of that we will be working with bigger amount of the renewables, but here my understanding is with the offshore that the ratio of the operation is much bigger than on land wind. Nevertheless, what I wanted to say is that if you would be interested, that you can look on our website, and then the landscape of the network of the Polish transmission system is changing. And the thing is that exactly these projects, they are like reversing the view that we had in the past. So originally, Polish power system was built in a sense that we were transferring the power from the generating sources that were mainly located in the south, where the coal mines were and where was the generation, and everything was transferred to the center and up north. Right now it is reversed, and then also on the top of standard AC lines, we are considering building the DC connection. So in a sense, this is on one hand, I think opportunity for us, because we see this transition that bigger amount of the conventional generation is going, is being wound up, and then we are awaiting for the new generating sources. Then in a sense, we will have a challenge with constructing of these new transmission lines. And then, as I said, we need to think what to do during the times when there is no wind and there is no sun. And on this sense, I think big challenge will be how we will see that the storage, this is one thing, and how we will see that the power market, because even with newest technologies in power electronics, the storage will not deliver the amount of energy that we will need during the shortages of the wind and the sun.
I think the answer is nuclear. I think the answer is nuclear, and then it costs so much money that it's probably, financing first Polish nuclear project will take, what, 35, 45 institutions, or perhaps even more, or maybe just 2. We'll see. But I think it will be massive. So it will be like four times bigger than offshore financing. But the answer is, temporarily it's probably storage, because you will not be able to accelerate construction of the transmission line that you basically able to do it within a year or 2. It's physically impossible. And then, to provide a stable generation, it's nuclear. And as we hear, it's kind of a semi-renewable.
Yeah, but then when talking about nuclear, the thing is to what extent we would be able to build the environment for this power plant to operate more or less constantly. The thing is that this is well, in normal conditions or in the past, the nuclear units were at the bottom of the generation. So these were the units that once they were put into operation, they were constantly operating. Right now, if they will be competing on the market with the wind, then they will have to reduce, go up and down. This is not good for the machines.
Yeah, and who's going to pay for that?
Yeah, and then this is costly.
Yeah, true.
I very much like what Pavel said about offshore wind projects, that these are different leagues, that these are projects from a different league. And this is also how I see it. I worked for some players from the offshore wind sector, and I have this feeling that to
Hello,
our country...
I'm sorry, I would like to have a little technical question.
Sure.
So I am Mureș Andani, I'm from a student from Romania, and you talked about these new transmission lines that are way bigger that you built. Will these, and how will these be better regarding energy loss than other ones, or the ones we have in Romania?
Would you like to answer?
Could you once again repeat what the question?
Yes, so I am interested in these new transmission lines that are built. These are way bigger than the ones already here. And regarding power loss, energy loss with the transmission lines? How are these improving?
Well, so in terms of the first question, we will stick in most cases to 400 kV voltage, so we will not go up. But I mean, in terms of the transmission thermal ratings, they are fair enough. There are challenges with construction of the new lines. What I was referring to was that the concept of building the DC line. DC line is, well, different from the AC, but it is better in the sense of the control of the flow on the line. So in this sense, that this will be different. In terms of power loss, I think that we went to somehow, I think, the limit. I don't remember the ratio on what are the transmission losses, but I think there is no much to be more that could be done in this sense. I mean, to lower them.
But comparing to the other ones, because these are way bigger in capacity, so wouldn't this affect its capacity, the transmission?
So this will only increase. You need to look at the transmission line as a freeway or highway, whatever. So it only gives more capacity for the electricity to flow. And this is, you need to look at it in this way. But in terms of the losses are natural phenomenon. I think that they are decreased and not much can be done in order to decrease them more.
Thank you.
And let me correct me, I understand that, well, technology in the grid hasn't changed so dramatically when it comes to infrastructure. The challenge is that you have to respond much faster because, as you said, the generation fleet was generated for decades in one place, and now it's being generated in years, constructed in years everywhere else, right? So it's redistributed, and you have to connect it, right? That's the challenge.
Exactly. So on one hand, from the perspective of the TSO, well, like 50 or 30 even years ago, it was easy in a way that we were forecasting the generation, how much number of units we need in order to cover the demand. Right now, this is changing because there is a wind, there is the sunshine. So in this sense, we need to be more flexible to this. Also, I mean, this is funny thing, but because I have the weekly meeting with our director of the control room, and I mean, for him, one of the most important information is weather forecast for the next week. I mean, this is something what we are right now relying, and then yeah. And the thing is that it is improving really. I mean, for like next 3 days, we know what will happen, and then. But the challenges are not only in the transmission network. The thing is, as you said, most of the PV installations, we have 20 plus gigawatts, like 2/3 of them are on the roofs on the households. So the thing is that there are the challenges right now appearing in a DSO system. So what we are doing right now, we are trying to get into the contact with the DSOs on how to deal with the phenomena that naturally in the past were rather applicable to the TSOs. So in terms of balancing the grid, in terms of operation with, I don't know, the generation, in some days, the generation, which was, well, this is yet additional shift that not we had the generation only transmitted from the south to north, but this was on the transmission level, and then it went to the distribution. Right now, it also reversed. The thing is that the amount of the capacity that is installed on the roofs is such that we need to look as on the distribution system as the source of the generation, and they are in feeding our grid. So this is yet additional change and challenge.
Do you think that everyone having electric vehicle will help, or everyone who has a rooftop should have an electric vehicle?
Well, I was a part, in this discussion that I think, yes, I think in a sense, I mean, on economical side, I think that the best in Poland, in our conditions, is if you have the house outside of city center, you have the PV on the roof, then you can, of course, if you had this net metering system, when you could take over part of the power that you deliver to the system, which was treated as the storage, which it isn't. But in a sense, from economical perspective, yes, if you have a house outside of Warsaw, you have the PV, it is very good. And then if you would be able to build the system, the balancing one, the incentives in order to charge the car when there is overproduction of electricity. And of course, then I think it would be good. But then also I have one last comment. Even if we have we do not see much of the storage right now because it is of course behind our meters. But for those that we have, and when we were looking at how they are operating, they are not operating in line as we would expect to the market. So, I mean, when sun goes up, they are charged and that's it. And I mean, so something needs to be changed. We introduced the reform on our balancing market. With this, we hoped, and I think that it is appearing right now that the pricing is better. So negative price will probably also appear. And in this sense, maybe this will incentivize the customers in order to play according to this curve of demand and consumption.
Okay, thank you. I have two questions to...
Hi, excuse me.
Sorry?
I would have a question as well.
Please go ahead.
My name is Bir Edwin and I come from the same faculty and country as my colleague here. I would like to see the view or opinion of the board when talking about the process of creating green energy power. When talking about, for example, turbines or the solar panels, you're talking as the standpoint of the critics of green energy is that the process of creating these turbines or solar panels is more costly when looking at emissions than the emissions saved by these green energy producing sources. Maybe the view or standpoint on how this should be mitigated, or the investments of the banks, how should they be placed?
It's a tricky question. That's a good one. Thank you for this. Mulțumesc. I would put it that way. We probably will not be able to give you the proper answer, but just look at the facts. Most 90-something% of the PV panels are not produced in Europe; they're produced in China. We've worked on the project involving the production gigafactory for batteries for the cars, for EVs. I mean, the supply chain, when you look at the geographies, it's crazy. So yes, it's a question, what's next? Is there hydrogen the answer? Perhaps yes, because hydrogen you need to produce, you cannot really travel for long. So you cannot really transport the hydrogen easily. So perhaps, you know, instead of thinking about the EVs with the current batteries, you can think about the EVs with the hydrogen. And order basically consumption on the place. So you would have generation and consumption at the very same place. That's probably the future, also given the constraints with the grid. So data centers could also be the answer for that. But then if we can go further and ask, you know, where are we sourcing the chips from? I don't know, and probably will not be answer to this. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Yes, another question. You have talked about offshore wind and these projects. What are some maybe technical hurdles or challenges you have faced when talking about these and creating these offshore wind turbines?
Well, question is whether you are asking about the process of construction, because no? Okay.
Rather the legal standpoint. So maybe
sure.
as we have international waters and as such.
Sure, I can take this one. Thanks for that. I think, as mentioned, this is the new environment for a number of reasons. So first of all, little has been constructed in the sea. Nobody really cared so much about the legal standpoint of things which are constructed in the sea. There are different risks, so also the parties who are the stakeholders who are involved, they look at what they're supposed to do differently. First of all, they dictate the terms, because you can't just have a ship to come install the turbine. You have to have a very specific ship, and by the way, this ship is being highly demanded by offshore investors globally. So you have to make sure years in advance that you, as a sponsor, that you book the slot for that ship to come on that day and be available to install your turbines if there is a bad weather, bad luck. All these risks have to be thought in advance. And if you think about the scale and the cost, then it really makes a difference, to do it right or to do it wrong. So I think that really adds up to the complexity of things. And so you have the element of that it's new. The element is really not explored in terms of the local environment, and that it's super costly. So mistakes cost, and you can't really afford that. It's competitive because you compete. Global offshore wind market, it's probably the way to put it. You don't have a local offshore market. It's the same technology which being installed globally by the same players, and they all compete against each other in terms of supply, in terms of slots, when to do it, when it's more affordable, etc. That also adds up to the challenge of that, and it's not so much legal, but also legal. We have to take that into account. The good thing is, as I mentioned before, we're not the first ones, so these challenges have already been addressed by someone. And when we learn about that, we look what our colleagues have done in the UK market, in Germany, in France, in Taiwan, in Japan. They also have quite a bit of offshore, not so much in the US anymore. But for instance, Romania is the next potentially, hopefully, big offshore market, and you are developing your regulations, and you're not trying to reinvent them from scratch, but actually looking at what worked, what didn't work elsewhere. So I think that the experience, the global experience, which is being explored, is what helps to address that.
I have two questions to Ms. Katarzyna Gronwald-Gill from Nordea Bank. So I hope we'll see some different perspective, how the bank sees the industry. And the questions are, can banks benefit from financing of energy transition projects? And is Nordea open for financing of energy transition projects? Does it align with Nordea's strategy?
Actually, this is what Nordea aims at. Actually, the sustainability is at the core of Nordea. Nordea is present in 4 markets, in Denmark, in Finland, in Sweden, and Norway. The greenest economies in Europe, and supports this. So actually, all the projects related to energy, energy transformation projects are at the, well, we are aiming at. Nordea has a strategy to be net zero bank in 2050. In order to achieve this, we support all the sustainable financing. The goal is to support sustainable financing amounting to 200 billion euro till 2025. This was set up in 2021, so we achieved this goal. We are now at the level of 174 billion, so it's already big bulk of work done. yeah, any kind of green financing supports also us presenting in numbers as green bank. In 2024, for the first time, all the banks were disclosing green asset ratio. The aim of this ratio is to somehow compare within the banks. It was the first time that all the banks disclosed this. Of course, it's still some fine-tuning because it was the first time everybody is learning. So I would say that the first time banks disclosed this was not that much comparable, but years by years we improve. But this is whenever you finance any green project, you just increase the numerator of this ratio, and you are more green. Whenever you are more green, you can receive better ESG rating. Whenever you have better ESG rating, you can have better conditions for financing, cheaper capital. So then you receive cheaper money, then you can sell cheaper, meaning. So this is the mechanism, how it works. So absolutely, this is how it fits the transformation, energy sector transformation actually exactly fits to Nordea goals. There is another, in order to achieve all the sustainable targets, there is also the power sector target to reduce energy intensity of our portfolio by 70%. What does it mean? It means that the more green energy products we finance, the more closer we are with these targets. So saying here, Nordea fully supports all this type of financing.
Is there any type of renewable energy project that is that you prefer in Nordea Bank to finance?
No, just it's it's converted into numbers. All the projects where we just then calculate all the carbon footprint from every financing. Then we show it as a total number for Nordea. So all is measured. So starting whenever banks started changing all these great ideas into numbers, it's simply, I would say there is a second type of accounting that now is being introduced. For the time being, everybody was calculating only profit, loss, and something. Now, it's the second type of financing. It's carbon footprint accounting. There are the PICAF rules, very complicated ones to calculate it properly and evenly in all the institutions. So how it is.
Thank you. Do we still have some time? Okay, because I would like to ask Mr. Remigiusz Warzewoda from the PSE, the Polish Transmission System Operator, about Harmony Link, which is an electricity interconnector between Lithuania and Poland. There are many interconnectors in Europe. There is Viking Link between the UK and Denmark, and NordLink between Norway and Germany. And there is also this project called Harmony Link. There were many different approaches on whether it should be offshore or onshore project. And it seems that something has happened recently. And I would like to ask Remigiusz Warzewoda from PSE about his view on the project, and also, most importantly, what is the role of PSE taking into account the geographical environment of Poland and our current international situation in these terms.
Okay, thank you for this question. So Harmony Link is a project that was, I think, figured out back in 2019, when the synchronization of the Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia was back then on the political discussions and plans. And then in 2019, when the decision of the synchronization was taken, it was based on assumption that it will be performed on the alternating current connection that we back then had between EUC and Alytus. And because this synchronization was relying on this one connection, back then on the data that we had, we thought that that its full capacity will be blocked in order to secure safe operation of the Baltics. And minding that in 2019 there was a trade on this interconnection, but through back-to-back connection, so we were not synchronized. The idea was to have the synchronization in a way that this eucalyptus line would be transferred into the synchronous connection, and then there would be a cable harmony link between Poland, starting in substation Żarnowiec and ending in Lithuania, in substation, I think it was Darbenai, for the DC link. For the long connections undersea, the cost-benefit ratio is better with the DC links. It gives some good, but well, the thing is, it is not reliable in a sense of adding on the security of the synchronous operation, but it was foreseen in order to have the trade in between Poland and the Lithuania and the remaining Baltic TSOs instead of the one that we would lose on the eucalyptus line. And the thing is that the preparations for the building of this line were for a couple of years, and then I believe at the end of 2023 we received the final offers, and if I'm not mistaken, they were like 2.5 or 3 times bigger than we assumed. So we assumed 7 million euros, and this was, if I'm not mistaken, even up to 1.6 billion. So because of the COVID, because of the war, the costs of the DC equipment went up. I think that colleagues, when you were your projects, I think that they are still on AC lines, but for the DC, I think, and those on the offshore that will be far away, more far from the coast, that this from the first group, this are also considered on the DC. So because of this high cost, we had to drop the procurement, and then we started to figure out what could be done. And then when looking on the different projects, namely the building of the railway, this is the Rail Baltica, and then Via Baltica, we thought that maybe using the part of the land attached to those, we could think about building yet additional connection with Lithuania, but this time in AC mode. So this would be additional alternating current synchronous connection. And eventually, in the middle of the last year, we were, after like first preliminary studies, and then we signed the agreement with the Litgrid. Litgrid is a TSO of Lithuania to go with this project. And also what we've managed, because there was big funding attached to the DC solution, we managed to discuss and agree with the European Commission to transfer these funds into the AC onshore line. So one of the the project right now is running. It is in a preparatory phase. Both we and Litgrid, we took the decision, the investment decisions. Right now we are in a projecting planning phase, preparing the technical requirements for the line. For the time being, the end date is 2030, and it seems that it might be secure. One thing interesting is that it will be on 220 kV, and it will be also cable, but this time AC. So, and also interesting thing is that on the way there will be 2 new substations on a transmission level that will also help somehow from our perspective to energize this northern part of the Polish power system. So in a nutshell, I hope that I covered the questions.
I think in the transmission system operator in PSE, you've got a really international project here. Plus, there are lots of challenges. Even let's take into account the offshore wind projects that we've discussed. They have to be connected to the national network. So it's also very, very challenging for you in the institution that you represent.
Yeah, but lucky for us, we have the experience with building of the interconnectors with other countries. So the recent ones was the first lead pole link or eucalyptus line. This was commissioned, I think, in 2015. Then what we managed, this was also, I think, relatively quick as for overall our organization. This was bringing back this Rzeszów-Chmielnicka line with Ukraine, but this was, well, in my view, everything was not thanks, but because of the war. We were able, because of the war, to proceed fast. And then, more or less, I think we have the pattern. So construction of the international connections, it is something that I think more or less we know how to do. So then, I mean, of course, it is a challenge. Of course, there is discussions with the other TSOs. Here, the challenge will be that this will be the cable connection. With the cable AC connection, there are technical challenges, mainly with the voltages, but I don't know whether I should go into the reactive power. But with the reactive power, so from the technical perspective, it will be a challenging process, but in terms of its operationalization, I think more or less we know the drill.
It seems to me that the discussion that we've just had clearly shows that there are truly challenging and very international projects in the energy sector now. And I will get back to what Paweł said about half an hour ago, that offshore wind, these are different, these are projects from a different league. And when I spoke to some representatives of key players who currently are taking part in the energy transition, they clearly admit that they work on international projects in international teams. And I've got the feeling that along with the energy transition, a number of international companies came to Poland in a scale that was not seen before. Let's take as an example the offshore wind. There are lots of projects on the way, because I think there are only 2 which obtain the final investment decision. So it's Baltica 2 and Baltic Power, right? But there are other on the way, and the next auctions will take place. So we are speaking here about international business coming to Poland in a scale that was not seen before, and there are Polish professionals who work on these projects as advisors, as engineers, But I think one of the biggest challenges here is that the Polish energy companies should really learn from the international partners and should really be very much involved in the projects. So to have capacity and experience to perform these projects in the future. So what I think is not only relying on the experience of the international partners, but also involve their professionals in the projects. And I know that there is some issue with that, and that Polish companies, they know that they should somehow also be, they should also somehow learn how to do it and be more, maybe more involved in the projects, just to be prepared for the future. So I think this is one of the biggest challenge for the future also.
Do you want me to comment on this?
Please.
Yes, absolutely. So that's I think that's happening. That's happening. So that's why all the projects that we have in this phase one, apart from one, is being developed by in joint ventures. So it's basically also aimed at transferring the know-how and understanding how it's being done. But also the other ways of doing this. For instance, in Lithuania, though Lithuania, is anyone from Lithuania here? No? So in Lithuania, the way the main utility, Ignitis, approached offshore was by first acquiring a stake in a project in the West. So that's perfectly for the purpose of understanding how it's being done and operated. So that's how they approached the offshore adventure, by learning. The other examples of how to do it is like the Germans did. They had the pilot projects, especially when they started on the North Sea and later when they started on the Baltic Sea. Pilot projects, small projects with 2, 3, 5 turbines, very close to the shore, so to save the costs and the hassle related to the distance. So these are alternative ways of learning by doing. But yes, the JVs are the most common theme, and we see this, I think, around the globe.
Are there any questions?
Questions, please.
Okay, if there are no questions, maybe something from your side? No? Okay, thank you very much.
And have fun, have fun.
Well, thank you for all the valuable insights and comments that you are so kind to share with us. And now I see you're slightly worried that I am taking over the mic again, and of course now I am separating you from the coffee break, but relax. I took over the mic just to invite you to enjoy a cup of coffee in the hall outside of this room, right? And I guess we'll resume at 3:15, right? I'm looking at you, Philip, just to confirm. Okay, so I see you here in less than half an hour, right? Yeah. Okay, 3:15. I see you here. Bye. Thank you once again. following our coffee break, let us now move on to our second discussion round, entitled Energizing Partnerships, Energy Disputes in the Baltic Region. Yet again, we are joined by the panel of distinguished experts who will guide us through the characteristics and challenges that shape the disputes in this challenging sector. Moderating the discussion is Monika Dill from the Court of Arbitration at the Polish Chamber of Commerce and Clifford Chance. And Monika will introduce now our panelists. Please join me in welcoming them.
Thank you, Janek. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very interesting debate or panel ahead, and the topic of today's panel is very close to my heart and my practice in the region, and I have a great pleasure to introduce you to our esteemed experts who will explore various pathways to disputes in the energy sector, also taking inspiration from the previous panel about what's going on in the sector. So let me first do the introductions. Piotr Biernatowski, who is an attorney and partner at GP Partners, where he leads the dispute resolution practice. He's recommended in dispute resolution in international rankings such as Chambers and Legal 500. He co-authored the best-selling and really best-selling, because it sold almost 9,000 copies, book, The Little Book on Drafting Pleadings, How to Communicate and Argue in Writing. So I think something that everyone interested in becoming a better advocate should look into. He has over a dozen years of experience in dispute resolution transactions and commercial law, having handled disputes with a total value of almost 1 billion euros. Łukasz Wydra, a partner at Jabłoński-Koźmiński law firm in Warsaw, where he also heads the arbitration practice. He's a Polish qualified advocate with a PhD in arbitration. He has served as an arbitrator and represented clients in both domestic and foreign arbitrations. Currently, he's a coach and a member of the training team for the Wismut team of the University of Warsaw. And last but not least, Piotr Golędzinowski, who is also a partner in the dispute resolution team at Wardyński and Partners. He's qualified as an attorney at law in Poland and a solicitor in England and Wales. He holds a degree in finance and specializes in matters requiring in-depth knowledge of finance and accounting. He represents clients in a wide range of disputes, both in litigation and arbitration, with much of his current caseload involving the energy sector. So, welcome. And before we kick off with some very interesting case studies that we have prepared for this panel, I think it's also important to note why we are talking about the Baltic region. And of course, the region here and the CEE in more general, we find ourselves at the intersection of energy security, geopolitical strategy, and very complex legal issues. The Baltic region, with its strategic geographic location and diverse energy sources, has become a focal point for energy-related disputes. And it is obvious that with global policies such as the energy transition or rescission from the renewable energy sources taking place in some of the countries, the impact on the energy sector and result in potential disputes will be only bigger. Existing models will be disrupted, which will bring about more disputes. And also talking about some categories of disputes involving the energy sector, I think also judging from the previous panel, you can see that there is a few areas in which such disputes may occur. We obviously have contractual disputes over performance of long-term agreements, power purchase agreements resulting from market changes concerning force majeure or hardship, requiring renegotiation of contractual terms for energy delivery. We have pricing disputes, which we will also talk about concerning various pricing mechanisms in energy contracts. There are obviously M&A disputes related to the energy sector, which can be particularly complex here because of the industry's volatility. And of course, we have infrastructure disputes over construction of mega infrastructure that you have also heard from the previous panel about. And finally, ISDS, so investor-state disputes concerning damages for expropriation or violation of fair and equitable treatment in relation to states' introductions of various energy policies in the renewable sector, in the fossil fuels, taking various administrative decisions, authorizing or decommissioning certain projects, which may all lead to claims against the states. So we will talk a bit about these various types of disputes, and we will, in all that, be showing you the benefits of arbitration and how it is well suited for these types of disputes. And I think we will start with explaining a bit about the challenges of complex energy disputes from more of a procedural and practical perspective. And I know, Piotr, you have an interesting case study of an energy dispute taking place in the Polish courts. So I would like to invite you to discuss some key challenges that the parties face there.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for joining us so late on Friday afternoon. Okay, thank you, Monica, and thank you all for joining us this Friday afternoon. So actually, the energy dispute in the Baltic region that I am currently in position to plea relates to the provision of services on the offshore platforms by our client, who is the provider of helicopter transportation services to the offshore platforms. And it actually relates to geopolitical issues that we face today related to the war in Ukraine and kind of closure of some areas of the world. It is a long-term contract because for providing services, helicopter services and transportation on offshore platforms, you need to, establish a base, get all the licenses, etc., etc. So it was 4 years contract for 4 years term, but after a while, as a result of war in Ukraine, it appeared that the helicopters cannot fly over the certain region of the Baltic area. So they had to fly around. And as you may know or not, there are two types of remuneration in such contracts. One is ACME, which refers to aircraft maintenance, aircraft crew maintenance and insurance. This is one part of the remuneration. And the second part of remuneration, very important one, relates to the minutes of the flights. So the flights took longer, and as a result, the contractor, our client's business partner, was not very happy about it. But it was obviously unrelated to our client's will or performance of the contract. As a result, the contractor started to hinder cooperation. He started to raise multiple questions about the performance of contract, about the calculations of the flights, duration, about safety and security, which is very important in the flights, as you may know. And we felt for some time, my colleagues from the public procurement and from that were responsible for this contract and for this relation, they felt that it's going to that the things are going south with this contractor, and that they are looking for cause for immediate termination. And it actually did happen. As a result, we are pleading. We have filed a plea for damages resulting from the unlawful immediate termination, and we are seeking damages which equal our lost profits until the end of the contract, as it should be terminated in 3 years from now, 2.5, let's say. So we are facing various challenges in this case, which might not be faced if we were in arbitration, and that will be maybe a good start for my colleagues to follow on. The first challenge is that since the contractor was multiplying small issues which were related to the calculation of remuneration and let's say the safety, security issues and very specific and detailed issues related to the flights performed with the usage of helicopters, we have to combat and actually prove in the court that those all issues combined didn't actually take place, or they didn't or should not be qualified as the prerequisite for determination. Quite complex, since they were just gathering the small points over the course of a year of cooperation on many levels of argumentation. It requires a lot of documentation. Since our client is from Germany, it also requires a lot of translations that has to be done by sworn translator. Otherwise, in the Polish court, they might not be accepted. Moreover, we had to gather all those documentations and file those documentations translated by sworn translator at the beginning of the case, because otherwise we might have face preclusion, and the evidence might not have been admitted in the later stages of the case. So it was also an issue of explaining our German client that all those documentations has to be presented in the court right at the beginning, which was something that we had to explain, and they were like, really? Right now? Already? Why? And yeah, we did that. So the other thing that is a challenge here is to present all the documentation, the evidence that prove what costs our client in Germany would have related to this contract, in order to be able to calculate the lost profit until the end of the contract that should take place, so for 3 years from now, or 2.5, roughly speaking. Those are the serious challenges, and I think that the last but not least challenge is that the case will take place in the Polish court, which is north of Poland in Gdańsk, and let's say, I would like to say it's using the football terminology, we play on a away stadium, okay? So it also makes a difference.
But the goal starts, counts double.
Yes, that's true. So based on those three issues, let's say the groups of issues, I think that if we would have a case in arbitration, that we might not be facing those challenges, or we would be facing those challenges, but in a more informal way, in a good sense.
It's very interesting what you're saying in terms of these differences between how the courts handle evidence and how they could be handled in arbitration. And obviously there's a lot of logistics to it. I was wondering if you maybe see already now in this case that what would also help in arbitration would be expertise, so that you would be able to appoint different experts than in courts, or that the arbitrators you would be able to appoint would maybe have had similar cases before, whereas the away court may not have handled such disputes previously.
Of course, in arbitration, you are able to, let's say, pick up the people that are suited for the job. In Poland, we have corporate courts. For some years now, we have IP courts, but it's if we speak about corporate courts or commercial courts, still we are speaking about very broad expertise that is required, right? And I think, Monica, you made a point here, very valid one, that if you are in arbitration and you have arbitration clause, you may pick the people that are very suited for the job. And we worry that in a case where there are a lot of layers resulting from hindering of the contract performance by the contractor of our client, the court might not get into all of them, and let's say rule horizontally on the issues that he sees a lot of issues, but he doesn't want to understand the whole and every issue vertically, like very precisely. So I agree.
And do you think the law applicable matters? We do, just to add to that, we do have seen cases in practice where in arbitration under foreign law, lawyers who are not necessarily admitted to the bar in the given jurisdiction, like for instance, we have a case in the Baltics where we are representing clients in relation to some price adjustment disputes, contractual provisions. Under Lithuanian law, we are obviously not Lithuanian lawyers. We do have some local counsel advice, but we are not representing the client as Lithuanian lawyers, and the arbitrators are also not Lithuanian. Do you think that would maybe also change the picture in your example? Would it be better if these people who were looking at this case were not necessarily based in Poland or Polish lawyers, or could that be a factor also that gives benefits to arbitration?
That refers at least partially to what I mentioned before, that we are playing away, not away from our stadium. We are representing a corporation from Germany in Poland in a dispute, and it always matters. You may not know it, but it always matters.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, speaking of the jurisdiction, and if you necessarily need the lawyers from this jurisdiction, it speaks very highly of you, Monica, that you were picked up for such a case. And you all should aim for that kind of reputation, which I highly recommend. And I think that in the disputes that are related to very specific expertise, it makes a bigger difference than the jurisdiction itself. And we know that the contracts are huge in those kind of cases. Almost everything is provided there, but still there are issues that cannot be foreseen.
I fully agree, and especially maybe in cases that are more about contractual provisions rather than the interpretation of the law itself. And I know, Piotr, you have an interesting case about that is actually in arbitration and concerns the energy sector, and that various aspects of both price adjustments and multi-tier clauses were present. So I would invite you to discuss that.
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say hello to all the Mutis who came to Warsaw for our pre-mod. I hope you will enjoy this weekend as much as possible and learn a lot and also have a lot of fun. Maybe not too much fun, but enough. So before I comment on the case Monica mentioned, I want to add to what Piotr said. I actually have, as Monica mentioned, I tend to focus on finance-related disputes, but actually there are so many energy-related disputes that this is most of my current caseload. And one of the major cases I have, it's against a state-owned enterprise. I represent the consortium leader, and the contract, as in the Wismut case, was actually concluded within the public procurement procedure. But in our case, the state-owned enterprise didn't agree to have an arbitration clause in the contract, even though it was a major investment worth perhaps over €1 billion. And now we have a dispute following up that execution of that project, and our clients, the consortium members, the contractor was sued for multiple claims, and the problem for the claimant, for the state-owned enterprise who didn't want to have arbitration, is now that they have to translate all the lawsuit and all the evidences that are attached to it. As Piotr mentioned, in Poland we have very strict preclusion of evidence principle. So this means that all the evidences they had to actually, they can imagine that could be relevant for the matter, they had to attach to the lawsuit and to their statement of claim. And as the consortium members are from Poland, from Germany, and from Spain, they have to translate everything by sworn translators to German and to Spanish. The court granted the claimant 6 months. I think it might not be sufficient time for them to do so. It might take even a year before the proceedings restart, before the statement of claim is served upon us properly, upon our clients. And this also speaks to the advantages of arbitration. If this were arbitration, they could actually start with a request for arbitration. They could work on translation of the relevant evidences in the meantime. This wouldn't have to be sworn translations, but it was their choice. So now they have to deal with that. Going now to the case, following to the case I wanted to speak about, I had a really interesting arbitration in the energy sector. Energy disputes are of many types and flavors. This was something totally different. It was a joint venture between a company, let's call it Company A. It's a big producer of commodities from Poland, so big that it actually has its own energy and heat plant, only for the purposes of its facilities. And some time ago, they wanted to modernize that, and they were looking for a partner, and they have chosen Company B, which later became our client. And it was a bit untypical JV, because what they did is that they actually carved out the energy generating assets and transferred them to an SPV. The SPV was formally owned by the Company B, by our client, and our client invested in modernization of the energy generating assets to make them more efficient, basically. And the agreement was that well, our client will get the money back, obviously, and the profits stemming from the increased efficiency will be shared. What has happened is that in the meantime, Poland introduced some green energy support schemes, and the SPV started to heavily benefit from this. And based on the JV framework, the parties to the JV were sharing these windfall profits. However, as you may already know, maybe not, every JV has some kind of dissolution mechanism. Usually these are call and put options, because it's natural for one of the partners to take over the JV when the grounds for cooperation are not there anymore. And because the plant was actually part of the facilities of Company A, the options were to its favor, and there was a pricing formula in the options, which actually didn't take account of the windfall profits and from the green energy support schemes. And the arbitration we had was whether the formula should be updated, whether it should actually, because the original intention of the parties was for the formula to have this same proportion of profits shared between the parties in case the JV is terminated at convenience. So it was a very interesting dispute. Ultimately, the tribunal didn't decide to update the formula. It said that, well, the formula is set as it is, even though there were some missing elements in it, but still the arbitrators were very hesitant to intervene in the pricing mechanism for the call option. And our client was ultimately quite disappointed with that decision. However, this is an interesting story, because soon after, Poland changed the support scheme, and the Company A stopped to benefit from the profits it actually wanted to get by this termination of the JV. And now, actually, as far as I know, Company A even sued Poland in investment arbitration for the profits it actually wanted to achieve by terminating the JV, and but wasn't able to get. So this is kind of an interesting story I wanted to share with you. And
I may have heard about that case.
yeah, it's not a big market. So I imagine you might have.
Can I just ask you, Piotr, about, because you mentioned the arbitrators eventually didn't update the formula, but generally, would you agree that in arbitration there's still more chance that they would than in the Polish courts? Because I assume there is a lot of controversy around, how far arbitrators tend to go in comparison to the courts. Do you think it would be different in the courts or with a different panel of arbitrators in a different jurisdiction?
Well, I think it's a bit complex. Our case was particularly difficult because we were not able to provide a clear legal ground for the arbitrators that they have authority to update the formula.
Exactly.
It was more equity-based claim than black letter law-based claim. And I think that actually often arbitrators are more hesitant to intervene in contracts than judges are. So judges are used to making difficult decisions because they handle a lot of different cases. And during their training, they have some exposures to criminal law cases, to family law cases, and they are used to deciding that, to taking difficult decisions. And what arbitrators, what the mindset that arbitrators have, in my view, is that they are looking for an authority to make the decision stemming from either the agreement or clearly stemming from the letter of law. And I think that it's also interesting because in Polish law we have this provisions in the civil code which allow the judges to intervene in the contractual relationship if performance of the contract becomes overly burdensome for one of the parties. But we don't have a similar provision if one of the parties gets profits from the cooperation, which were actually not foreseen before, even if this is kind of a JV, kind of maybe something similar to a civil partnership. So it was an interesting matter. I don't know if in our case it would be more likely that the judge would intervene. I don't think so. But I think that in some matters, judges might, I would say that I would suspect that more often arbitrators would be willing to intervene if there is a commercial ground for that. But I would also suspect that if judges intervene, the scale of intervention might be actually higher than in case of the arbitrator's intervention.
Interesting. That's slightly different from my experiences, where I've seen a bunch of cases in which the arbitrators, not necessarily only in Poland, but just went, maybe a bit too far, even without a clear basis to adjudicate based on equity. And I think there's this general perception in the business that arbitration is kind of like more equity friendly and willing to maybe not look at the black letter of law. But I think it's interesting what you're saying, because it also shows us that it's never like black or white whether arbitration or court is better suited for these types of complex disputes, and it's something that it might be difficult to assess when you sign the contract, right? So
yeah, I think you're very correct here that it's very much based on the types of arbitrators we appoint, who they are, and the types of cases we get. And it's very difficult to predict how the situation might develop. And this is also something which might be relevant for you guys if you become dispute resolution lawyers. I think you might agree with me that sometimes we are quite surprised with the awards or judgments that we get. And so,
Not to use the word disappointed.
yes, so it might.
Surprises might be positive.
Exactly.
Yeah, surprises might be also positive, but obviously we know that this. Well, our minds work this way that we always remember the negative feedback much clearer than we remember the positive experiences. So it's also a part of the council's work to handle the disappointments and to be prepared for that and still be ready to invest all your effort and energy in the case, even if there is a risk of losing it.
And do you think multi-tier clauses are maybe an answer to the fact that at some point it's difficult to upfront know which solution is better? So maybe a multi-tier option is something to walk around it. Do you have any good experiences with such clauses?
I think it's a very good idea to have this kind of clause in the contract. And I also see that negotiations or mediations are more and more successful, especially in Poland. In Poland, we have a special body within the government, which is called the General Council for the Republic of Poland. And this body established a court of arbitration. The court actually does not have a lot of work because no one wants to submit cases to it, but they have a mediation center, which is very active. And this mediation center is a place where the state-owned companies, which are usually the employers in the biggest contracts in Poland, are willing to mediate before, and sometimes even the mediations are actually included in this multi-tier dispute resolution clauses. And this is quite successful, and we have lost some good cases which were settled before the dispute actually really started. Obviously, to the benefit of our clients, so we are still happy for that. But what I wanted to share also in relation to the case that you have this year, that I have this kind of impression that there is a little, at least from my perspective, there is a little bit of confusion as to the issue of admissibility when we compare investment and commercial arbitration. Because I think that multi-tier clauses should be treated a bit differently in commercial and investment arbitration. And this is the result of how these mechanisms are designed and what's actually the party's intention. So in investment arbitration, if there is actually a BIT or a multi-party mechanism where there is an option for arbitration, it's very carefully designed in which cases the arbitration actually can take place. And what are the conditions for the claimant to be fulfilled to actually be able to initiate arbitration. So arbitration is kind of a special tool that's envisaged only for particular scenarios. That's why it's very important to actually consider whether all the conditions have been properly fulfilled before the arbitral tribunal actually goes to the merits of the matter. However, if we look how commercial contracts are negotiated, it's not only natural to have some kind of dispute resolution mechanism. And actually the only choice is between litigation and arbitration. So if there is already arbitration in the commercial contract, it's clear that the parties actually agreed to arbitration, and the choice was made between arbitration and litigation. And if there is an additional tier which takes place before arbitration, it's only to increase the chances for the settlement to take place, if it's only possible. But there is no, usually in the party's mind, it's only kind of additional mechanism which is kind of accessory to arbitration or to the arbitral clause. And that's why I think that there are some good arguments from this perspective to argue that even if the multi-tier mechanism is not followed, actually each party to the commercial contract should be allowed to initiate arbitration, even if it didn't go through all the stages of the multi-tier mechanism, obviously unless there is a clear wording in the contract to the contrary. But I have seen more and more voices in the arbitration community arguing that somehow the arbitration clause in the commercial contract is conditional, for example, upon certain previous conditions being fulfilled, and mediation is a condition, and until mediation is at least attempted, then there is formally the arbitration clause doesn't actually come into force, and arbitration is at least inadmissible. And I personally don't agree with that from this perspective of how the parties approach negotiation of this kind of clauses.
I agree, and just, you know, it reminded me what you said of an interesting case that I was working on in the last couple of years. It was under, I think, the law of Kuwait, but the contract said that ultimately the case is to go to the state courts in Kuwait, but a multi-tier layer of it was to have a dispute board, like a proper ICC dispute board proceedings. It was like a huge construction dispute, right? So what essentially happened, and I think, you know, like the idea maybe when drafting this clause was as to have exactly what you said, right? To have this like dispute board decision that would somehow help the settlement, which obviously didn't happen in this case. Like the case went to the courts anyway, but it's also a bit inefficient because the parties invested huge amounts of work, funds into running, which is essentially a proper arbitration, because that's what the dispute board proceedings tend to be. So you have these large pleadings, experts, hearings, which then result in a decision that is not binding. And eventually you have to go to the state court in a civil law jurisdiction where the proceedings look completely differently. So you always have to think about, you know, whether this also is really efficient to even try to use this additional layer, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I have a case where we had mediation, and actually mediation was very narrow. We wanted to extend its scope to all the issues that were potentially contentious, but the contracting authority didn't agree. And then the contracting authority drew the bonds that were securing potential claims that it could have. So we applied for interim injunction, freezing the bond, and actually we were successful. And we had to initiate arbitration to support the injunction, because there must be some kind of main proceedings going on for the injunction to stay in force. And within this arbitration, the responding party actually argues now that we initiated arbitration too hastily. We should have actually started mediation first, but actually it was firstly, you know, that we wanted to have mediation, but before they drew the bonds, but they didn't agree. And then actually we had to act, and there is no doubt in my mind that there was no chance for mediation to be successful while they were drawing the bonds from us. So it actually, it's a bit formalistic. I think we should go back to the more commercially minded approach to looking at this.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, it shows that there's a lot of procedural aspects to it in terms of these complex energy disputes. But I also wanted to move a bit towards the merits of it all, and maybe give the floor to Łukasz now. But I would be interested to know what all of you think about this. ESG, that's obviously the substance of something that we have heard about in relation to energy disputes, and it may have very different angles and land in a very different types of proceedings. So I know, Łukasz, you have some interesting thoughts on that topic as well, so that we move a bit further from the procedure for now.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Łukasz Wydra, and it's a great pleasure to speak ahead of so many gifted young lawyers, young arbitration practitioners, and with so many colleagues who are also so gifted arbitration practitioners. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to elaborate today on certain aspects of the ESG in the context and from the perspective of its relation to arbitration. Because there's always a debate whether the ESG matters should be arbitrable or not. And well, the dispute is developing. And even today in the morning, I came across certain academic articles which develop the concept and cover both matters, which the ESG really is and in its relation to arbitration itself. So, first, I really wanted to understand what the ESG is, because I guess that, well, we have some thoughts about what it could be and how it should be understood. But from this perspective, I came across certain doubts about whether it's an idea or something more. And, well, there are always several concepts. So some people claim that there's nothing but an idea and concept, while the others believe that it's just a set of data or information. Well, depends. I believe that it still will be a huge debate over this, but from this perspective, we will need to develop what does the idea, the meaning of the ESG cover. So from that perspective, well, it covers certain issues and matters faced with environment, social sphere, and relations to government. So this is the meaning, the understanding of the ESG acronym. And from that perspective, once we ask this question about whether or not the ESG matters should be arbitrable, well, the answer is simple. Well, it depends, because there are two flips of one coin. One scholars believe that arbitration is a perfect suit for considering those ESG disputes. Then the others believe that, well, arbitration is not a perfect fit for considering cases related to environment, social sphere, or governmental matters, which is why also puts us in the middle between those battling or challenging concepts. I believe that arbitration is a good fit from that perspective, but surprisingly, I read several articles during last days covering that particular matter, which means the arbitrability of the ESG disputes. And surprisingly, it stated that, well, once we mention those advantages or benefits of arbitration, which are, among other things, cost saving, speed of arbitration, of that opportunity to assign considering cases to professionals with a lower impact of those formal procedures, as my gifted colleagues have mentioned during this discussion. Well, so I believe that academics draw their attention to not to those, I guess, two core factors which make arbitration more beneficial to parties, which are costs and time savings. And surprisingly, the most attractive factor why arbitration should be applied is that opportunity of neutral consideration of a case for parties. Well, from my perspective, it's obvious, because we are all aware of that the neutrality is the core factor in arbitration, and all arbitrators should be neutral, which means they should be independent and they should be free of any prejudices. So from that perspective, well, it's something which is obvious. However, it is emphasized in academic considerations about that relation of the ESG disputes to arbitration. The other factor is professionalism, which also is obvious and clear in the context of normal, ordinary arbitration. So, well, parties expect arbitrators, or, well, for some purpose, they go to arbitration and they want to resign, to cease their competence to assign or to put a case for the hearing to litigation, and which is why one of the factors is that arbitrators can be experts within a particular scope or matter, and from this perspective and for this reason, arbitration is also a more attractive mean for them to consider their disputes. So it doesn't, in those ESG arbitrations, is less about cost saving and time saving, but it's more about those two features I have just mentioned. And if we can imagine that there are certain arbitrators who believe that, well, even arbitration is even more suitable matter of dispute resolution for that cases, it means that there are some examples given in the doctrine, and many people have mentioned some African disputes, well, covering and concerning not particularly matters which are corporate matters and relation to daily corporate operation to arbitration, but it's rather about considering cases in the context of sexual violence, murders, and even other sexual matters. So from this perspective, it seems that those arbitrations are brutal because, well, they touch brutal issues, and some of them might seem controversial to us from our perspective, because normally we would say that, well, certain things don't happen in Europe, but as you see, well, I'm showing you the data of 2024, so it had been just before that year when those disputes were settled in Africa, in particularly in Kenya. So as you see, it's easy to put and to somehow try to put certain disputes and consider that, well, that particular matters and arbitration well covers that ESG sector. And well, this entire concept is pretty interesting from the perspective of developing concept of the ESG, because well, I guess we all agree that, well, we can hear from every now and then certain things about the ESG. And as I have just mentioned, well, the entire concept is unclear, and, you know, there will be a huge debate, I guess, over the understanding of this idea. However, it's doubtlessly, I guess, it's that the majority of people believe that also arbitration is expanding, is developing. And from that perspective, if we put together those two, well, I wouldn't say things, but if we put together the ESG and arbitration, well, as a result, it turns out that, well, I guess the future is about the ESG in the arbitration. So from that perspective, once we use the arbitration as a mean for dispute resolution, that I guess would be fine for also considering those ESG matters. And it's inevitable in this context that, well, if we talk about energy disputes, well, it's a very characteristic up to a huge point that those disputes, energy disputes, are based or somehow related to the relations with particular governments, and this is inevitable. So, as you see, we can clearly and swiftly step from that ESG into arbitration from energy sector into the ESG. So they are not completely separated. As you see, there's a match between them, but I guess we will have that opportunity to speak more about the ESG and its relation to energy disputes in the rest of our panel.
Thank you. I think, you know, the government point you mentioned is very interesting, and I also wanted to touch upon that in a second. But before I go there, in terms of advantages, and maybe for the time being, let's treat ESG, let's narrow down the ESG disputes to environmental disputes, right? Because that's probably the bulk of precedent cases that have landed in arbitration in the last couple of years. but some of them were obviously also in litigation. And I think there is a lot of, again, coming back to what we discussed, that sometimes it's not obvious whether courts or arbitration is better. Do you guys think that in terms of these environmental disputes where sometimes it's about, having these issues widely publicized, having, amicus curiae briefs, or having NGOs participate, or, talking about these issues in the public, which in arbitration is difficult because of the confidentiality obligations and the nature of it. Does that make any difference? Would you think that there are ways through arbitration pursue the same goals essentially, or should we rather look at various types of disputes landing in different forums in that context? Do you have any particular views on that? Any of the panelists?
Well, I might be a bit biased because I do relatively lot of human rights litigation, and I think that from this perspective, it's quite important to have the possibility to litigate your cases in the courts, especially those relating to human rights, to public policy. Very often these are strategic cases which are precedent setting, so it's important for the claimants to be able to set the precedent and to actually change the lead to the judiciary issuing a decision that will set the tone for next judgments. So this is something which, from my perspective, is really important, but I think it also depends on the strength of judiciary in a given jurisdiction. So if we are speaking about countries which don't have robust judicial system, perhaps arbitration would be a more fair solution for the potential claimants than having to litigate their cases in the local courts. However, I think that if the local courts provide a really level playing field for both parties, they are a very good option for this kind of environmental disputes.
And I think it plays nicely with what Łukasz said about the, some jurisdictions and some human rights issues being considered obviously maybe much more controversial topic than energy, which we are discussing today. And that's why I tried to narrow it down to environmental side, but I agree with you. I think in terms of, energy or ESG, but like energy cases that may find their way into arbitration, there are of course different angles. So one of the probably closest to my practice would be claims against states related to regulatory policies in the energy sector. And just to give you a few examples, in the last years, we worked on cases, and you may have heard there has been a flow of cases in various jurisdictions in Spain, Italy, Czech Republic concerning renewables, and that's something that Piotr already mentioned, and the regulatory policies that the states introduced to support renewable investors and how they incentivize them to invest and enter the markets. And then there was some sort of a withdrawal from these policies, and this brought about a flow of cases that simply landed in investment arbitration because the investors decided to sue the states. And obviously the outcomes of these cases are different, but they are an element of shaping the ESG or the energy arbitration field. But from another angle, one could look at cases where, and I think we discussed this a bit in preparation, like Vattenfall versus Germany, where Germany decided to phase out nuclear power plants from that, and then Vattenfall decided to sue Germany, and the case was eventually settled. I also worked in the last couple of years on a case in the Balkans, where the investors were entered the market with a view to build a gas power plant, but then the state decided that their environmental impact assessment was not enough. They did not outline properly how they plan to mitigate the CO2 emissions, and there was the whole argument around the Paris agreements. So that's obviously the investment treaty angle to the environmental side of things, where these ESG policies can actually be brought into life. But these sort of disputes have in common what you, Łukasz, mentioned, so the government, right? And whenever you have the state or government interference, is arbitration better? What do you guys think?
Well, from my perspective, it's even more than better. It's inevitable from that perspective, because no one takes that particular risk to litigate once you have, well, a state as a counterpart to a particular dispute. So, you know, likewise, international contracts, once you have a foreigner as a counterparty to your contract, it simply means that, well, they will, with a huge probability, they will not agree to put a contract under your state law, which is obvious because everyone wants to somehow evade going to a state court in a legal order we don't know. So that's reasonable, and from that perspective, I believe that arbitration is will also be a better solution. That's it.
I think it's a shame that, for example, Polish entrepreneurs cannot use bilateral investment treaty against Poland in many cases. Why are you laughing? I had those discussions with my clients, like, what can I do if they actually expropriate me or they harm my business so much? Well, shall we go to the court? Here? Oh, not necessarily, maybe. You still have a running business, whatever. I don't want to sound like a lawyer from third world country, but it's an issue in all the countries, I guess, more or less. The rhyme was accidental. I think that it's quite impossible to make it enforceable, but it would be a huge change for all the entrepreneurs. Let's hope for that in the future. I have quite a few clients that have some issues with the state, but they are from Poland. And a long time ago, it was possible somehow to transfer your registered seat and try to sue Poland from abroad. Right now, it's more and more difficult, maybe even impossible, because you have to disclose ultimate beneficiary owner or in the proceedings, in the preliminary proceedings, actually, if you want to file a case. And yeah.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean in terms of how the system works. It's actually why the whole bilateral investment treaty system was even put in place, because to ensure that foreign investors can actually litigate or arbitrate disputes not against the state, but not directly in the state courts. Which eventually, as some say, lays down a situation in which the domestic investors are maybe in a worse off position just because they can't use that system. And of course, there are probably ways around that, as you mentioned. But it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think that the whole regulatory public policy impact of it is something that would be completely differently looked at in the state courts, right?
Somehow discriminatory.
Yes, but the tendency actually is anti-discriminatory, because less and less foreign investors are able to sue Poland in investment arbitration, mainly due to BITs and also the Energy Charter Treaty being rescinded. And and even if for example, in terms of the Energy Charter Treaty, even if it's considered binding, the CJEU Comstroy judgment commented that the arbitration clause would be invalid itself. So even though the material obligations of the state still should be there there is no forum actually to claim the remedies. And on this, against this background, I had this thought that it would be an interesting development of the European law if it would be considered that member states don't have a jurisdictional immunity in front of the state courts of other member states. Actually, I think it might sometime take place because, as you know or may not know, it's not. But under the international public law, it's not possible to actually sue one country in the courts of the other country without this defending country's consent. This idea is called the jurisdictional immunity, and I think that if we consider European Union a zone of so close cooperation, where the countries have mutual trust in their judicial systems and are able to enforce judgments from other jurisdictions without any review, I think it might be the next steps, one of the next steps in enhancing the cooperation within the EU to allow for that. Obviously, it would be a very difficult political decision, but from the legal perspective, I think it might make sense at one point.
And it also brings me to this thought, coming back to the region, this very idea of suing the courts, the foreign countries in the courts of another state is obviously something that has been taken into consideration in the whole Ukraine-Russia situation, right? Whether because obviously investment arbitration is also there, but even if you sue Russia for, let's say, expropriation of a power plant because they occupy the power plant illegally, will they even enforce any treaty award that will be issued, right? And then where will you seek damages from? And maybe going to a court in a country where they do have assets would be an easier way. So I think that the war in Ukraine brought about a lot of these considerations under international law versus state immunity and the state court system, particularly in the energy sector.
So Ukraine did it actually itself. So what they did is that after the full-scale invasion in 2022, they developed this theory that a country which itself infringes upon international law cannot avail itself of protection of international law. So the Russian Federation, which breaches the international law by instigating an aggressive war, should not take advantage of the jurisdictional immunity also provided to it under the international law. And this resulted in a flurry of cases in the Ukrainian courts where the parties harmed by the war, for example, owners of shelled buildings and other similar entities, they start cases for compensation in front of the Ukrainian courts, and they are very often awarded compensation, but there is no way to enforce these judgments. And actually, one of the ideas I had is that maybe it could be possible to try to enforce such a judgment in Poland, because Poland is relatively friendly towards and compassionate towards Ukraine. And if it wouldn't be only Ukraine, but also Russia, but also Poland that would actually support this kind of new doctrine that Ukrainian lawyers developed, it might actually catch up easier. I didn't come across a good case to actually try this, but and maybe it's not the best moment already now. It might be too late. It might have been a case for that should have started a year or two ago. But I think it's still an interesting concept from developed by the Ukrainian lawyers.
Well, if I may say something about, as a follow-up to what my colleagues have just said, well, let's now go to the dark side of the force and let me say a few words about what were the developments of the Russian Supreme Court in recent years, because, well, from the perspective of arbitration, it's a pretty interesting topic. So, first of all, well, the Supreme Court of Russia, yes, they have such an institution, stated that, well, arbitration clauses with parties from so-called hostile countries, as Russia has its own list of hostile countries, well, they are expired. So there's no opportunity to handle arbitrations in Russia anymore because of the expiration of arbitration clauses concluded between parties of a Russian origin and those who come from so-called hostile countries. And likewise, when it comes to arbitrators, once there are arbitrators who should be nominated and they come from those hostile countries, it means by itself that by default, those lawyers are considered biased. So it's more or less like the equivalent of the Polish Article 1174 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which requires that standard of neutrality to be observed. And I guess this is an interesting development. Well, I don't know if anyone cares about it because I don't know. I haven't heard for many years about anyone who arbitrates in Russia, but perhaps, well, my colleagues have some information on that.
I think we might see something in the future about that.
I just wanted to add to what Piotr said, that is about this doctrine that Ukrainian lawyers came up with. There is a similar doctrine established in Polish Superior Court, which is called the clean hands rule. I think it's very similar, that just as a follow-up, you cannot claim upon the rules that you are breaking yourself.
Yeah, which is a very valid point, especially in this difficult geopolitical situation. And I don't know, unless you guys wanted to say something and add to that, I think we can open the floor to questions. And I think, I would encourage questions because, as you can see, all of these issues are vital, especially in the Baltic region and generally in the CEE, but not only, taking into account the current geopolitics and what's happening with the development of various energy investments that we have heard from the previous panel about. I think, there's a lot of work in the coming years in the sphere of energy disputes. So we would welcome any questions from you.
Do you think dispute resolution lawyers should be involved in the negotiations of complex energy projects, the negotiations of agreements? If so, why? Ladies first.
I'm a huge fan of involvement of dispute resolution lawyers in any contractual negotiations. I think, of course, the level of involvement depends on the particulars, but I think it's, putting aside obvious issues like procedure and deciding on whether arbitration or litigation is more suitable, whether we should introduce a multi-layered clause or not, what law should be applicable given where the parties are from and what's the subject. I think we have learned in our practice as dispute resolution lawyers that even the simplest SPA can bring a lot of disputes in litigation or arbitration. So it's always better to have someone to look at things. Maybe, of course, depending on what the costs allow for, whether it's possible to involve dispute resolutions from the beginning. But I think it should be a teamwork and involving. On the other side of things, involving energy lawyers in disputes is also something that we are doing in practice, and it only benefits the outcome.
Related to the projects from the quite often there are a couple of main agreements like that. And there they contain arbitration clauses, each of them, for a different arbitration tribunal. And I've come across many times a situation where we are close to the dispute, but there's no dispute because the players, they know, companies involved, they know how it will be when they really fight. Finally, they settle. There are a couple of settlements, so we are just forgetting about going to any arbitration tribunal. But quite often when I read the clauses and the agreements, I see that the dispute is so complex that there are many companies involved from all of these agreements. And I always think about how it would be if we have some disputes and we cannot join disputes from different arbitration tribunals. So quite often we will have parallel disputes, quite often touching the same problem, let's say. So my perspective is, and I think that quite often, if a dispute resolution lawyer is not involved at this stage, nobody really thinks about it when negotiating the agreements. So I'm just leaving it. I'll be happy to hear from you what your opinion is.
Apparently, you have just opened the Pandora's cage, mister. So let me just say a few words on that. So first and foremost, I believe that, well, in the context of arbitration clauses, the name middle clauses came from nowhere. So it means that, well, it's somehow justified in the light of how those arbitration clauses are negotiated. Then once, well, I will tell you something from a comparative law perspective. Negotiating arbitration clauses and their formal requirements do not vary that much in one country from another. And also, yeah, there are state laws which are more flexible and, there are lower formal requirements. As for the conclusion of our arbitration clause, for instance, I believe in Sweden or in France, you don't have to conclude an arbitration clause in writing. So it means that you can just arbitrate. And even the lawmakers from various jurisdictions facilitate just to encourage parties to arbitrate instead of litigating, because it always required certain involvements, a huge involvement of the state in litigations, which is why it brings us to the conclusions that it's nowadays, I would say, well, it's not quite difficult to join arbitration as a party. Well, it also depends, but once a party accepts the terms of a particular arbitration, it should be fine. It should be fine unless the other parties decide otherwise. So from that perspective, the forum shopping, I guess, is something which is not so frequent nowadays. And well, in the context of arbitration, once you have that opportunity to join a particular proceedings, well, I consider the forum shopping as something which is likewise yetier. Perhaps it happens, but once you want to resolve your dispute, I guess that it shouldn't be so problematic.
I think that the involvement of dispute resolution lawyers is a must in the negotiation of contracts, and I have nothing to add to Monica. Only one anecdote: when I had when I was running an interview for our M&A team, I asked a question to a young girl. She was a lawyer, obviously, but younger than me. How do you perform compulsory redemption of shares, right? And she said, like, well, I don't know. I'm in an M&A team. Like, we pass it on to the dispute resolution lawyers, right? And it makes perfect sense to have actually the people who do the things when you write those things that has to be done.
Whether they have ever seen an actual enforcement of certain mechanisms.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Hi, so I also have a question. It's because I imagine that often in energy disputes, one of the parties is a state-owned enterprise that in a way realizes the governmental policy. And with the change of the government or that policy, I mean, this particular party may infringe on the contractual terms. So in that scenario, does it open a way to also forum shopping in a way, in the sense that provided that there is a BAT or other ISDS mechanism and also another arbitration agreement between the commercial parties, does it ever come up in practice to pick either investment or commercial arbitration? Is that the thing?
I think it's definitely a thing. I mean, it's probably a bit more nuanced. So it's not really about choosing the forum. It's you know, you can do both things, and it would be assessed by the tribunal or the court whether the parties were actually allowed to go with parallel claims or whether they should have sticked to the local courts or local arbitrations only. There is this concept under international law and then the treaties that is referred to as fork in the road. So some of the treaties contain this provision which basically say that, you know, either you go left or you go right, and if your SPV decides to sue the counterpart state-owned entity, it means you are not allowed to go to the treaty case anymore. But on the other hand, there is a concept that's called essential basis, and you know, if the basis of the dispute is not the same, and here you have a contractual case versus a international law case, it's a completely different case. So why would you choose a forum, and why not go both ways? So I think, you know, you can argue, as in any case, both sides of things.
And you know, it's actually quite complicated when you look at it, because there is what Monica mentioned, that in some treaties there is this fork in the road provision. But one another issue is, for example, whether the actions of the state-owned enterprise can be ascribed to the state itself. So is the breach of the contract by the state-owned enterprise a breach of the obligations under the BIT by the hosting state? And in general, it all boils down to whether the actions which constitute the contractual breach have some kind of sovereign element in them. Is it merely a breach of the contract, or whether there is some kind of policy, state policy decision that has been taken that reflects on the performance of the contract. And this has to be actually proven within the investment arbitration, that the state actually chose to interfere in the contract. And you can have, for example, document production ordered to get some documents from the state-owned enterprise that would actually allow you to, or there might be press releases, or but there must be some kind of evidence to this point, and then it should be possible. But I guess, you know, there still might be some jurisdictional issues, so it will never be a very straightforward matter unless you decide for example, only commercial arbitration or only investment arbitration. But it's a very interesting problem.
Yeah. And I think, you know, just coming back to how you put your question, which was, you know, the dispute starts with some change of policies or actions of a state-owned company. Well, obviously, probably there is a link, right? It's not necessarily in vacuum. I mean, like, you'd have to look at the facts, but as Piotr mentioned, but generally, state-owned companies do not operate against the will of their shareholders, right? Like any companies. So that's a factor to take into account as well.
Okay, thank you. I asked this question because this is a part of the Wismut case. It's not an issue, but it is a scenario there. So
That's why we are here.
And we landed in the commercial arbitration.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions?
You mentioned the problem of enforcing arbitral awards, for example, like the awards issued for the expropriation of Ukrainian power plants by Russia. And I wanted to ask, do you think that there is much value in actually obtaining such awards, which might be difficult or even impossible to enforce?
Why do you think it would be impossible?
Well, it might be quite difficult. Not necessarily impossible, but in the present case, I think there are certain obstacles which might lead to the problems.
Yeah. You know, I think that from the practical perspective, there are so many awards issued against Russia that you have so many, creditors chasing the Russian assets that it's difficult actually to. Maybe that's the most difficult part of enforcing. There are the awards issued within the Yukos saga for billions of dollars. So this itself makes it very difficult to enforce anything else. But there have been, for example, some discussions that maybe some of the frozen assets of Russia could be used to satisfy some of the claims. So you never know. It's obviously from the client's perspective, it's also any dispute is a kind of investment, and it seems that they are deciding to make these investments. And I think that investment awards have also the political dimension. I mean, for example, the Ukrainian companies, they want to have some kind of instrument confirming that international law has been breached. So it makes sense also for this reason for them.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add to that, I think that may be only my views, but I would assume most of you share it, that, you know, this is what international law is there for exactly. And this war is particularly showing that, you know, these mechanisms should be used, and we still don't know where and what exactly would be able to be enforced in the future. And we should, you know, use all the mechanisms available and argue the case that this is just not the right way. So.
Yes, and sometimes if I may contribute to this discussion, to this particular point, it's, well, I will share something personal. So I used to work as an in-house lawyer for several years. And sometimes it's not about winning. It's about, you know, a piece of paper which is necessary for your financial internal services just to, you know, to consider a case as done. So irrespective of whether you win or lose. So from that perspective, once you will be, I guess one day perhaps you will work for your client, which will be an international, you know, corporation, global corporation. And from that perspective, well, believably, irrespective of whether you will win in Russia or, I guess, and even if an award will not be fully enforceable, well, it doesn't mean itself mean you have lost. So from that perspective, it might be even more relevant. You have an award in your hand than the consideration and the final results and the outcome of the arbitration, for instance.
Hi, I would just like to point out that there was recently a case in Finland in which they were able to enforce assets against Russia based on a foreign award.
That's a pretty interesting story. So how did it happen? Could you please give some detail on that?
I'm sorry, can't remember the facts. I was actually working on that case. I can point out later.
Oh, because that's a really interesting story.
If there are no further questions, then I think we are coming towards the end of our time slot anyway. So I would like to thank my great panelists today and thank you all for your attention and we hope you enjoy your moot experience and in the couple of years we will see you all in the energy disputes field.
And likewise, Monica, thank you for hosting and handling this panel.
Thank you.
Many thanks. Yeah.
Thank you all. And well, here I am taking over the mic again. And as we conclude today's insightful discussions, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to all the speakers, all the moderators, and all the participants for contributing to such a thought-provoking exchange of ideas. Your engagement and expertise have truly enriched this conference, and thank you for that. Now, without further delay, we transition to the opening ceremony and workshops relating to the 16th Warsaw Pre-Moot. Philip, correct me if I'm wrong, but there will be a short coffee break right now. And in front of the room, you will be able to register for the workshops and pick your name tags. So we invite you to do that. And well, let me from as an ex-Mootie and as a coach, let me tell you that I wish you all of the teams best of luck during those 2 days of competition and of growth of your skills, of your knowledge, and of your confidence. And may this experience be another step that will bring you towards the success in Vienna. Thank you.